Hey guys, LC Holt here, and this is my weekly update for the week of September the 10th. And tonight I'm going to be talking to an indie filmmaker, a horror enthusiast, Jeremy Todd Morehead. Jeremy, how you doing tonight?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. I wanted to jump in there right off the bat and talk about a film that you made a couple years back,
Sure.
which was called Easter Sunday.
Yep.
And you got to work with some guys. Was that the first film that you directed?
Yeah, that was my first film.
That's pretty impressive because you got to work with a couple guys in there that have been around the block a few times. The late Robert Zadar.
The late great, yeah, man.
What was it like working with him? How'd you get him involved with the project?
So he was fantastic. So I wrote the movie, and I had actually written it with him in mind for the role. And I was like, man, it would be so great if we got Robert Zadar. Like that was just my bucket list wish guy. So once the script was done, we started kind of putting some pieces together. And I think the first time I called him, he hung up on me. I don't think he knew who I was or what I was doing. I think he was like, "All right, kid, like I'm out," and he hung he hung up on me. I'm like, "All right, well, that went terribly. So I guess we'll try again." So shot off the script to his agent. Next thing I know, I get a phone call from him, and he's like, "Hey, man, I got the script. I really like it. Let's talk." And I'm like, "Cool." And I didn't bring up the fact that he had hung up on me the first time.
Right.
But which it kind of made it even sweeter when we actually got him. That was the first reaction. But yeah, so it was great. So we just talked about the script. He really dug it. He got it off the bat. He knew that it was very tongue in cheek. It was a horror comedy to like the fullest extent. And he was. It didn't take very much convincing. He was on board. We made it happen, and we flew him in, and he was an absolute blast to work with. One of the actors that we had, one of my good buddies, John Mccoy. It was his first acting gig. Like he was always really passionate about acting, and it was funny. His first scene ever was with Robert Zadar, and he was terribly nervous. And Zadar came over and he was like, "Hey man, don't worry about this, and you got this. Hey, let me give you a couple pointers. When I walk up, here's the couple beats." And he started giving him, some advice, and it was just like, oh man, it was kind of surreal to watch Zadar directing one of my best friends. And he was fantastic. We laughed and joked the whole time, and I can't say enough great things about him. It was funny, after the movie wrapped, he continually just called me. He was a big fan of like CSI or one of those shows. It was Fringe. It was Fringe. He was a huge fan of Fringe, so he'd hit me, "Hey man, did you watch the latest episode of Fringe?" And he'd want to just talk and bullshit on the phone. It was awesome. I'm like, oh wow, like Robert Zadar's calling me. This is fantastic. So yeah, he was great, man. And he never got to see the film, which really sucked. But I think it was definitely something that he would have been proud of for sure.
Yeah, some of the coolest things about working on a film, when you're starting out and you get an actor like that, is you get to sit around the set and really pick their brain about different people that they've worked with. I remember when we were doing Homesick, which was the first film I did with Adam Wingard. We had Mosley there, and that was always fun to hear some of Bill Mosley's stories. And the late Tom Tolles, who was a really cool guy, really cool guy. I told Wingard, you never give me the scenes to work with the really cool people, which
Cool.
at that time was true, but he corrected that mistake later because I got to work with some really cool people in the later movies.
That's
But
awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, Bill Mosley, man. Him and Robert Englund. I could watch those guys talk for hours and hours and hours. And there's those two Hollywood, horror guys that they have like 1,000 stories, and they're fantastic. So I'm definitely envious you got to work with him.
well, I'll tell you a Bill Mosley story that he told me, which is interesting. Was he worked with Karen Black on House of a Thousand Corpses, and when we were shooting Homesick, the House of a Thousand Corpses was done, but it came out while we were shooting because I remember Wingard and some of the crew went to see the movie because Mosley was in it, but it was just coming out in the theater, I think, in a limited release. And one day we were sitting on the set, and Mosley was sitting there, and he was kind of closing his eyes in his chair and trying to take a little cat nap, which is almost impossible to do on a film set. And he told a story about Karen Black. He said that Karen Black could sit on a film set with everyone walking around her and yelling and doing everything that people do, you know, pulling cables and stuff, and that she would just close her eyes, and a few minutes later she would just be asleep. And I just thought, wow, that's a great story. You know, where else are you going to hear that kind of story than with me? Bill had not mastered that, and I have never mastered that. You know, but apparently Karen Black could just close her eyes and just, you know, be out.
That's awesome.
Which is an enviable talent, because I don't, you know, there are many times I was on a late night shoot that I wish I could sleep, but that's just impossible.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk to you. You had another friend, Ari Lehman, in that too.
Yep, we got Ari from obviously Friday the 13th in the film, and we got Ari because he was friends with one of my friends. It was literally kind of that easy. We're putting the movie together, and one of my friends had mentioned to him, "Hey, my friend Jeremy is making this slasher comedy called Easter Sunday, and it's great. You know, like if you could maybe share something on your social media about it." And Ari was like, "Yeah, cool, I can definitely do that. I'd love to help." And then he reached out to me and said, "Hey, man, I'd love to, you know, help you promote the movie and the filming of your movie." And we started talking, and the line of communication was opened up, and he was like, "You know, I'm available if you'd like to have me for anything." And I'm like, "Absolutely." And we made it happen, and the flights were booked and everything. So that was the easiest one, man. He was so cool, so cool. It was great to work with him.
Yeah, he's a fun guy at conventions as well. He's always entertaining.
Yeah, actually,
Um,
I have a funny story about him. So there's a scene in Easter Sunday where he has a Ouija board and he does a séance. And so my wife, we were filming the scene actually at my house, and my wife was not happy that we had the Ouija board at my house. She was like, you know, she lets me have all the horror movie stuff in the house, and one of her rules, well, she has two rules. Rule number one, no clowns. You know, nothing Pennywise in the basement, no clowns. And rule number two was no Ouija boards. And so
right.
I had to break it to her. I was like, "Hey, so we have a scene that we're filming at the house with a Ouija board," and she was not happy at all. But you know, I sweet talked her, and it made it happen. And then so Ari showed up, and I didn't realize it. He was talking to our mutual friend that was there. That yeah, I guess he was telling them like, "Hey, I really don't like Ouija boards. I'm really not a fan of them. You know, does it have to be a Ouija board?" And we kind of had that conversation. I'm like, "Look, it really needs to be this." And he, of course, he was a team player. He was like, "All right, man, let's do it." But then afterwards, he was like, "Oh man, I did not want to fucking touch that thing at all." Him and my wife were both super freaked out about using it. And then as soon as we were done filming, I had to, of course, get rid of the Ouija board. So it was gone. But he was not a fan.
Yeah, he's not a fan of the witch board, was he?
No, not at all.
Well, let's back up just a minute with Easter Sunday, because I'd like to ask, like, how did you start the process of that? I mean, where did you decide I'm going to make a movie? I'm going to make a feature.
Sure.
Was it something you had always done? Did you do shorts first, or?
I didn't. I jumped headfirst into a feature. Now I had done, you know, different video work, like music videos and things like that. I've always been in bands, and you know, I took different film classes and things. But you know, for Easter Sunday, it was a thing that it wasn't necessarily something where I said, you know what, I'm gonna make a movie. Here's what I'm gonna do. You know, I'm a huge film fanatic, and I wrote the script. Like I've had the idea for Easter Sunday in my head since I was in high school. And so some backstory on Easter Sunday is that there's a you can Google it. There's a Bunny Man Bridge is an urban legend from my area. It's literally a 20-minute ride from my house, and it's this whole spooky urban legend thing. And so I always thought it was kind of creepy that that was kind of in my backyard, and that there's this guy that, you know, he had on a bunny costume, and he escaped from a mental institution, and he had hung people from this bridge. So the whole urban legend was you can't go under or across his bridge. So initially, when I was in high school, I started writing the script, and it was very slasher centric, and it was very non-comedic. And for some reason it just wouldn't click for me. So I tried writing it a few times in high school, and I would scrap it. And then I got out of high school, but for some reason the idea of the bunny killer and the Easter holiday just it never escaped me. So I finally sat down to write it again, and I was like, all right, man, I'm gonna try to write this again. And initially, I think the story was called Bunny Man or Bunny Man's Bridge. And so finally I sat down and I started, and the way that I wrote the film is that all the characters in the film, I literally took my core group of friends and based every character off of my core group of friends. That way I knew the characters off the bat, then I insert this, supernatural entity into the mix, and I was like, all right, well, it's got to be funny. All my friends are funny, and it clicked. It just I knocked the script out in probably 7 or 8 months, and it was still not a thing where I was like, oh, I'm gonna make it. I just wanted to write it. And so I started sharing it with some friends, and one of my buddies is like, dude, so we have so many talented friends, you from the music, in the local scene and everything. You've already done so many music videos and different things, like, let's do this. And so we kind of just started putting things together, and we planned on doing it on a smaller scale. And I think it became super super official once we cast Zadar, like, because we were casting local talent. And I actually cast this guy, Edward X Young. He's a New Jersey actor. He's great. He's in this movie Mr. Hush with a bunch of different
Mm.
known actors, and he's fantastic. He's been in over 70 films. So he was another like outside source talent that we cast. So we cast him, and then we cast Zadar, and I was like, oh my god, like, okay, so now this thing is kind of real. So it kind of, much like the Bunny Man in the movie, it kind of took on a life of its own. And then we made a movie. It was just, and it sucked, as making movies. It's super hard and difficult, and there's times where you're pulling your hair out, but obviously the fruit is in the labor. And once we finished the project, I was like proud father status. So and now I'm addicted. Now I'm hooked. I gotta keep making these things.
Yeah, well, that's great. What that that the end result is worthwhile is always wonderful because the journey, is something that no one will ever take. I mean, that's the thing about making movies, and I'm sure with Easter Sunday. When I think about some of the movies I've been in as an actor, even just as an actor, what I think about is the experience of making it more than I think about the movie itself. So when you can get a final product that you're as proud of as kind of the experience, it's always kind of gratifying in a way. But as you say, it's very, very difficult to make your own movie. I mean, it's incredibly difficult, and it takes a lot of time, years. From the time of the end of production until it came out, what was that like? The post production and the distribution.
So post production took, I want to say, 8 months to 10 months for post production. And one of my best friends, Jared Jameson, we're actually recording an album right now, but he's incredibly talented, and he's literally a computer guru and genius. So he handled a lot of the post production work, as far as a lot of the digital effects that we implemented, and different things, and making sure the color correction, everything was perfect, and everything. And then we had some ADR work that we had to complete for my buddy John Dirth. He's another person who's incredibly talented. So yeah, I mean, it just, the process was long, but it was amazing, because I kind of, when I was filming Easter Sunday, I was also editing as I was going, which is
Mhm.
a blessing and a curse, because sometimes you want to go back and you want to tweak things, and it's like, oh shit, I already edited this scene and it's already here. Now I'm gonna have to go back and deconstruct it. So that helped me in a lot of ways, and in a couple scenes I had to go back and tweak it. But it was like 10 months for post production, and then we started, talking to distribution companies, and we started getting offers off the bat, and I was very excitable. I'm like, let's take it. Let's take it. Like the first the first offer, I'm like, here it is. And then thankfully the producer on the film, he was like, no, no, no. I was like, patience, dude. Like, this is just the beginning. We're not going to take the first offer. And it was crazy, because there was a couple offers that we had from studios that I grew up like loving and watching their films, and just they weren't offering us a better deal than what other production companies were. And it was like, okay, well, we're gonna have to pass, which was kind of surreal too. It's like, oh man, like, it's crazy to be here and also be turning down some opportunities with these studios that I love. But we settled on Camp Motion Pictures, and they've been absolutely fantastic through and through. They've put out a lot of great movies. And Michael Rasso that runs Camp Motion Pictures, I mean, he was just a blast, and they're based out of New Jersey, so it wasn't too much of a stretch for us to go down there, and it was really cool because they've been around since the 80s. And he
Mhm.
gave us a grand tour of their film studio, and it was exactly what you would imagine, like a movie studio to look like. I mean, they had all these props. It was a huge warehouse. They had just cases and cases of movies and cameras and props. It was beautiful, and he's been super awesome. And the whole process was really transparent. He explained X, Y, and Z to us, and they've followed through on everything. And our movie is in several stores. It's on iTunes, Amazon. It's everywhere, man. So it's really cool that people are able to get it.
That's great because yeah, the distribution sometimes is the trickiest part, and it's good that you had that producer there. I know that you have to be really careful sometimes. I was involved in this thing one time, a movie that people talk about, but unfortunately can't really see too much, called Pop Skull.
I've heard of it.
And yeah, it's a movie that you have to pay like $60 to get a VH or not a VHS. What am I thinking? To get a DVD copy of it, and that's unsigned because it's out of print. It was a movie that it was the second one I did with Wingard, and they sold it to a distributor, and I wouldn't say the name if I remembered it, but it really doesn't matter anymore because the distributor went out of business with an option on the film that lasted for 10 years. So only recently have the producers gotten the rights back. They had to wait for 10 years
Jesus.
to get the rights to the movie back. So now they can do something else with it. But, if you're not careful, you can end up having worked years on a movie and then not have any control of it for as long as these options go, which sometimes they go, as long as a decade, which was the case there. So yeah, I definitely have to be careful with that. So it's a good thing that you found the company there that was, reliable and was willing to stick it out for the long haul.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, they've been fantastic. So, we've even talked to them about doing another picture with them. So hopefully down the line that'll happen as well.
Now, are you based out of New Jersey?
No, I'm in Virginia, like 20 minutes outside of Washington D.C. So Northern Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So so that's where the Bunny Man legend is, because I've heard of the Bunny Man Bridge urban legend.
Yeah, it's
But
Annandale, Virginia, or
yeah,
Fairfax. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's a good one because I'd heard of that, but I didn't know it was in that area. It sounds like a good X-Files episode.
Yeah, it's pretty creepy. I went there one time when I was in high school, and they're super super strict there. Like there's cops that sit out there all the time. Like literally they park there to make sure no kids go and mess it up or do anything crazy out there. And I was in high school, and my buddy was like, "Oh, we're gonna go to the Bunnyman Bridge." So I remember he stopped in the middle of the bridge and turned his car off, and it was complete pitch black. And I'm a horror movie guy, man. That's like rule number one. Don't do it. So I was already breaking the rules, and super creepy, man. Super super creepy.
Yeah, I remember my father, when I was young, used to tell me the story about something where I was raised in Alabama, and when he was a kid in the '60s, or yeah, I guess it would be in the '60s, that him and his buddies, what they would do with their girlfriends, is they would, take the girlfriend out in the car and park, and it was some field somewhere, out in the middle of the boonies, and they had set up on a fence post an old scarecrow. And what they would do is they would just turn the lights of the car on, but they'd leave the car in neutral instead of park. And so as they're sitting there with their girl making out and stuff, they would just ease off the brake a little bit, and the car would naturally roll down this little hill. And it would create in the darkness the illusion that this guy was coming toward the car. And it would freak them out, and I can't remember, they had a name for the scarecrow guy, but it's kind of weird. You get into these urban legends, and even the local ones, like Bunny Man, that's pretty well known.
Yeah.
But every town has some kind of an interesting thing that like the kids do or believe in. I mean, there's even one near where I live now called it was the Curse of Bear Creek Road, I think. People go down this road and there's, you know, a witch or something. I don't even know exactly what it is, but there's always something like that to be exploited by us horror people.
Yeah, there is, man. That story with your dad is really funny. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. That always kind of cracked me up. But there's another project you're working on now, right? Called Fredheads.
Fredheads. Yep.
What's up with Fredheads?
So I am like a lifelong, like most horror fans, Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm Street enthusiast. Like I love that burnt motherfucker. Like I love him. Even as a kid, you know, everybody knew who Freddy is. Even like in Wes Craven's New Nightmare, you know, Heather Langenkamp says every kid knows who Freddy is, and it's the truth. Every kid knows who Freddy is, and I remember being in school and you know, having watched the tail end of A Nightmare on Elm Street on Up All Night on USA Network and watching it and getting the basic idea of Freddy because I didn't watch the whole film. I just caught the end of it and then going to school and talking about it. And I mean, I was hooked. I was infatuated. I'm like, this is really scary. Like this guy can get you in your dreams. Um, so that's the film that really made me a horror movie fanatic. And I've loved horror ever since. I've you know, obviously all the Elm Street films are very special to my heart. So I have a core group of friends that are also filmmakers that we met due to our love of A Nightmare on Elm Street. Um, like we met at conventions or we met through friends, and we all just bonded over A Nightmare on Elm Street. And so Paige Joy, she is the director of Fredheads. So it was me, Paige, and a couple of our other friends that are now, you know, involved on the project. And so I have this huge horror movie museum thing, man cave in my basement because my wife is awesome. and so she was like, "Hey, I'd love to just do, you know, like an interview with you about Elm Street here." So I said, "Sure, yeah, come on over." So this was a couple years ago now. So she came here and set up her camera, and we started filming, and she started asking me like how I got into Elm Street, you know, why I love Freddy Krueger, why it's resonated with me, and why I think that there's so many fans of the series out there, like me and her. And so after the interview, like I literally saw a light bulb go on in her, and she was like, I think this whole thing just inspired me to do something. And I'm like, cool, yeah. I mean, you should whatever it is, you should do it. And so she didn't even tell me right away what it was. And then she hit me up later about it and was like, hey, like I'm gonna do this movie called Fredheads. It's gonna be a documentary, you know. The Elm Street stars, they already have their own documentary, right? And so this documentary is gonna be about the fans, and it's gonna be about the people who on Nightmare on Elm Street changed their life. You know, that they made their best friends through the love of this series, and maybe it's impacted their lives in other ways. And I'm like, oh man, that's great. Like I would love to help in any way that I can. And she was like, no, I want you to be one of the stars of the movie. So I'm like, I'm in. I'm 100% in. So we've been traveling to horror conventions, um, you know, on the East Coast and Midwest and everywhere, and we've been filming fans everywhere, and it's been really crazy to see this thing grow. I mean, as soon as it was announced, you know, every horror website picked it up. Not only in the United States, but you know, worldwide, everybody was talking about Fredheads, and it just further validated what we're doing because so many people care about this franchise and so many people love Freddy that you know, it's just been a really cool experience to see. Like we were at Horror Hound Weekend in Indianapolis 2 weekends ago filming, and we got to film at this burger place that's freaking amazing. It's Kuma's in Indianapolis, and so
Hmm.
they're freaking amazing, man. Like it's like this metal, like I mean, just like they blast metal music. All of the artwork in there is really punk rock, metal inspired artwork. Everybody that works there is like the nicest people in the world, with tattoos and piercings, and so we filmed there because they're huge horror fans, and they actually had a Freddy Krueger hamburger.
Wow.
Yeah,
What
so
and what is in Freddy Krueger hamburger? What does it consist of?
So we went there and we got to interview them for the documentary, and it was fantastic because I was the one that got to kind of talk to them about the burger, and then I got to eat the burger. So it was a cheeseburger with like pizza bites on top of it, to kind Freddy's face is very much like a piece of pizza, so it's like at the pizza bites on top of it. Different cheeses. There was sriracha on it, and they had dried red peppers and dried green peppers, for the sweater on top of it.
Yeah.
And to top it all off, on the bun, they have seared four claw marks.
That is awesome.
It was great, and then the burger was absolutely fucking amazing. So it was great, man. We filmed out in Indianapolis, and got so many great interviews, and it was just a blast. And we've just really been having a lot of fun making this thing, man.
Yeah, there's a I can think back to even my childhood. The first movie I have any recollection of watching is the third Nightmare on Elm Street movie. And I remember as a kid, I was probably, I don't know, it had just come out on VHS, so I was fairly young. And my brother, who was not a horror fan, his girlfriend had convinced him to watch it, and that pretty much consisted of him leaving the room and then me and her watching it. But I was totally into it, and I tried to con my father into taking me to see I think it was the fifth one in theaters, but they were like, my mother was like, no. But I did see Freddy's Dead with the 3D glasses. I saw that in theaters.
Nice.
So that was an interesting experience, and I've always wanted to watch that again in the 3D format, but I haven't. I haven't. I assume they put it out where you can, right?
They released like the VHS box set, and it comes with the glasses, and the glasses look cool. It's not really very effective, but it's kind of cool to pop on the little cardboard glasses and watch it. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, it's kind of popping out a little bit, but probably nowhere near what it was,
Yeah.
in theaters. In fact, we interviewed somebody at Horror Hound that said kind of the same thing that you said, that they remember, being in the theater and watching, Freddy's Dead in theaters, and the 3D was just mind blowing to them back then. So, um,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's just
Yeah, as a kid, it was mind blowing. You just sit there and you think. I think back of it now, and probably my recollection is not entirely sound, but I just remember going like, "Wow, he's coming out of the screen at me," And it probably wasn't the most effective use of 3D in a movie, honestly, but it was a neat little gimmick, and it kind of blew my mind as a kid, that's for sure.
yeah, there's something to be said about the Nightmare series. It's just so many people can recall where they were and what they were doing the first time that they, just like you did. You remembered exactly the first time that you saw it. I remember the first time that I saw it, and I just don't know of many franchises out there that are like that, that affect people like that.
That's true. I can't really think of another movie. It may have been the first horror movie I'd ever seen, judging from how old I was.
Right.
But I do very vividly. I remember the room I was in. I remember who was in it, what house we were living in, because we moved a lot when I was a kid. But I remember very vividly all of that, and I have a very clear recollection of the scene where Freddy makes the kid into a marionette,
Yep.
and thinking as a kid, "Wow, that's fucking crazy."
That death,
Um,
even still today, man, that death with the veins coming out of his arms, and they look all oozy. Even as an adult now, I watched that scene and I'm like, oh god, that one kind of stings still, man. Not many movies have that power that after several repeat watches still gets you to go, oh god, that thing, gross.
yeah, yeah, because the effects on those movies were pretty amazing. All that stuff was real. I mean, yeah, there's some optical stuff, but there's a lot of stuff in that that's just the good old fashioned guys with foam rubber,
Right.
and figuring out how to do it. And that's sort of why I'm glad the Freddy movies came out when they did. I think they came out in the perfect era, because even though you can use CGI now to do that dream stuff, there is something that's kind of charming and maybe a little better about the way it was done in the original series. Um, I don't know. What was your opinion of the remake?
Oh man, I love when this topic comes up because it's such a hot button. And just like we were talking about another film before we started the interview. that people were up in arms over it before it even ever came out. And this is a movie that people were pissed off about before it even came out. So I went into it like I go into any movie. Like, I'm not somebody that I'm like, ah, fuck a remake. Now, am I excited when they announce a remake? No. You know, in today's standards, you know, like I wish that they would just do continuations, kind of like how they're doing with the Terminator franchise and how they're doing with the new Halloween movie. It's not another remake now, that's a continuation. But I go into any movie just wanting to be entertained, like sole entertainment. Um, and so I saw it in theaters, and I remember it doing its job. I was entertained, but I didn't walk out of the movie going, fuck, I got to see that again. Like, that was great. Like, if anything, I was like, okay, well, like, it was entertaining, but I felt that the deaths were not very imaginative. You know, most of the deaths were literally just him and his glove and just glove to face or glove slitting a throat, whatever. So they didn't really wow me with the deaths. Jackie Earle Haley, like, I don't care whether you hate the remake or not. You got to give it to that guy. That guy acted the hell out of Freddy Krueger. He did his own take on it, and I definitely respect that he did his own thing with it. Unfortunately, the look of Freddy Krueger, they went with a more traditional burn victim look, which is fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of menacing in its own way, but obviously when you deviate that far from the iconic look, you know, it's kind of like, it's strange to look at it like, oh yeah, okay, well, there's the sweater, but that's not his face, you know. But I was still even okay with them switching up his look. But like I said, it just seemed the kids in that movie, all of them were already depressed.
Yeah.
Um, some of them were even like suicidal, to where it's like, okay, well, insert Freddy. So you've got this really bleak world that this movie exists in. You've got these really sad kids, and then you insert this guy that's killing them off one by one in their dreams. Well, none of them were too happy with life to begin with to really fight, you know? So it just kind of seemed like, all right, well, none of these characters are relatable. None of them are happy. I'm not really rooting for anybody. So, in an entertainment value factor, like, yeah, like I enjoyed it for what it was. But when I go to watch A Nightmare on Elm Street, I don't pop that one
Yeah. Well, I agree. I think there was a lot of kind of script issues with that movie. There was certainly potential there. I mean, Rooney Mara has certainly proved herself to be a good actress, you know. Um, but it's just some of the scripting with the characters was very difficult to buy. I thought the micro naps was a good addition to the mythology. You know, I wasn't too hugely blown away by the Freddy's new background, his backstory, which I it was kind of hard for me to buy that, and the idea that he was making the claw as a gardening tool. It's like, why would you ever garden with that?
in. Right.
Like, what are you going to do? Just like go around and snip the weeds like that, you know? It
Right.
was I like the idea of it being that he was a child killer rather. Well, I always kind of assumed he was a child molester. I mean, I thought that was kind of just one of those things you just go, oh yeah, well, he killed the kids, but before he did that, you know.
Right.
But I think, as I recall in the remake, he is only a child molester. He never killed kids when he was alive.
So it's funny, is in the original Nightmare on Elm Street, he initially was a child molester, and once they went into production, they were like, "Ah, you know, this is just really too dark. It's too heavy. Let's just make him a child killer." So then they kind of, and it was kind of still implied in some of the sequels that, okay, well, maybe some other things went on, you know, especially in like Freddy's Dead, or I'm sorry, Freddy vs. Jason, when it's like, especially little girls, like, it's like, all right, well, like, there's a darker past than what they've kind of let on in some of these movies. And for this one, they went full force. They're like, oh fuck it, we're going back, that, you know, to Wes Craven's original concept that he was a child molester. And I don't know, like, for me, that was another element that I'm like, you know, I could probably do without that. But yeah,
Mm.
I don't think he killed anyone in the remake while he was alive.
Yeah, I think he was a child, and then he came back from the anger of them killing him. I think that was the motivation, which I like the motivation in the original one a little bit better. And like I said, it was like we were talking about here. You know, it is an assumed thing that he molested the kids. You know,
Right.
I mean, I don't remember ever as watching those movies and going, "Well, he just killed them." You know, the
Right.
original series.
Right.
It seemed pretty obvious that he, you know, did some other stuff too. But you know, that was the thing. I guess Freddy's background, his backstory in the remake, and some of the lines were sort of placeholder kind of lines. It didn't seem like some of the scenes were very well written. I mean, I remember cringing at a couple lines in the remake, like where she's at the funeral at the beginning, and there's that little button line at the end of the scene where she goes, "You don't know what I've been through," and you know, it just goes to the next thing. You're like, "Wow, that really fell with a hard thump." You know?
Right. Right.
Whoa, that was a clunker.
Right.
But I guess occasionally some of those placeholder lines will just kind of stick, you know. But
You're like, well,
it could have been one of the.
Got to pad the run time.
Yeah, exactly. And it could have been one of those things where, you know, I think there were a lot of scripting changes going on as they were shooting, because I think there was a whole different opening which was shot and then rewritten, you know, sort of the 1990s dimension method of making a horror movie, where you make a movie and then you totally rewrite it and chop it to pieces and put it back together again and then call it a finished product, you know.
Exactly.
I always kind of refer to that as the 90s dimension films, you know, not too far off the canon films, but I don't want to say, I think Dimension created more quality material overall than canon, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Scream kind of ended that, because it seemed like that was a script that they stuck with, you know, the first one.
Then they went and made that Wes Craven werewolf movie, Cursed, and that was probably the worst case of them completely just retweaking it. I mean, like, they literally filmed 2 movies, because they filmed the movie and then the Weinsteins and Dimension, they were just so unhappy with certain elements, because it was much more a traditional horror film, that they went back and literally reshot 90% of the movie, so much so that so many of the actors that were working on the film weren't even able to come back and reprise their roles because they were already off on other projects.
Wouldn't you have loved to have seen the original ending of that, where Scott Baio is the werewolf?
Dude, I desperately want to see this other cut of this movie so bad, because, man, I remember being pumped about Cursed and like hearing about it for years, because it took them so long, because they've shot 2 movies.
Yeah.
I remember thinking like, oh my God, Wes Craven, you know, Christina Ricci, it's a fucking werewolf movie. Like, there hadn't been a werewolf movie in theaters in such a long time to that point. And I was pumped about it. So I was there opening night. And after the movie was done, I'm like, what was that? Like, and even still years later, I'm like, I want to see the other version.
Did you ever get a chance to read the original script for Cursed?
No.
I read the original script for that movie, and it was so different. You know, because like the characters weren't even the same characters, because originally the character that Josh Jackson played was a totally different guy, played by Skeet Ulrich.
Yep.
A guy named Vincent, as I recall. And like, even they filmed the whole movie where Jesse Eisenberg and Christina Ricci weren't brother and sister, because they weren't in the original script. They were they just met. They met during the car crash. So that's a huge change to the story, you know. And some of that material is still in the final cut of the film. Not much, but some of it. And you kind of watch it going, in that scene, the actors didn't actually know they were playing brother and sister, you know. Right. But in the final version, they are playing, you know, brother and sister. But yeah, Heather was in that, the original one. God, Scott Baio is still in the movie, but he's not the main wolf at the end the way he was in the original. Yeah, it was. And what's interesting too is there are 2 different versions. There's the theatrical cut of Curse that has that really quick little flashy nightmare scene that she has, where in the unrated version, she bites the guy's neck open, I think, or he bites her neck open or something. But in the theatrical version, she has that dream when she gets home after being scratched or bitten or whatever, and there are all these little well, those flashes were from the original cut. And there's some pretty amazing stuff. Like, there's a shot where she catches a fly with her eyelashes, and all that was in the original cut of the movie. So I assume they were just like, well, let's not waste all this. We'll just throw it like really fast in a little flashy dream sequence. But I would love to see that version, in its entirety.
I hope one day, man. I'm definitely gonna search for that script. I gotta check that out because I loved the premise, and it was such a, and you had Kevin Williamson that wrote it. So yeah, I definitely gotta check that script out, man. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure it's online somewhere. I read it out in LA, but I'm sure it's out there. And I think if there was more interest in the film as a whole, we would have seen by now that original cut. Because Hollywood never wants to throw money away.
No,
If they can, look what they did with the Exorcist prequel.
Jesus, yeah, that was
Just
another one.
yeah, just put them both out. Eventually.
Same time
And
almost.
yeah, yeah. Which I mean, we could probably go into that. We're getting to a point where we're going to have to start winding down here soon. But I mean, we could probably talk about these horror movies forever.
Oh man, absolutely.
Yeah, especially even the Nightmare on Elm Street series, because I have many, many good memories of watching those movies. I think for me, it was aside from the first four Friday the 13th movies, that was the quintessential film series that I grew up with. Was Nightmare on Elm Street, and I have fond memories of them the sequels to varying degrees. But the third one, probably because I think it was the first horror movie I'd ever seen, is has a very special place in my heart.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. So Kim Gunzinger, she's a producer on Fredheads. We met years and years and years and years before we ever knew that we were ever gonna make a movie together or anything. At a horror convention. It was the first time that I had ever met Robert England, and it was the first time that she had ever met Robert England. And we're both from the same hometown, and we had mutual friends, but we had never met each other. And so, you know, uh, I remember going to the convention and thinking like, oh my god, like I'm gonna meet Robert England. Now, mind you, I think this is like 2005 ish. So I'm like, oh my god, I'm gonna meet Freddy Krueger today. And so I'm driving, the 3.5, 4 hours to Jersey to meet him. And I get there and I'm not expecting to see anybody that I know at all. And I see my buddies, George Halsey and Kenny Halsey and Danny Halsey. And then I see this chick that I knew of, Kim Gunzinger. And so we meet, because we both love Freddie. And then, years and years later, she, co-starred in Easter Sunday, and then she's producing Fredhead. So it's just kind of funny. And then, like I said, again, that's kind of what the film embodies, and what it's about is just how Freddy Krueger has brought so many different people together. And Anthony Brownlee, who's he's another cast member of Fredheads. Like, I had seen pictures of him, on Facebook and things like that, because he attends a bunch of different conventions, and he was friends with people that I was friends with. And then it was just one day we met at a convention, and through mutual friends and the love of an Nightmare on Elm Street, and he's one of my best friends in the world now. So had I not watched that film when I was a kid, I don't think that I would have the same set of friends that I have. I don't think I would be the person that I am today, as crazy as it is. But film has that kind of power, and that's definitely what Fredheads is definitely all about.
Well, I can't wait to check it out, man. I think it's a great idea for a documentary. And it's always kind of nice to have kind of the figurehead, Freddie himself, Robert Englund, be such a great fan of the fans. He's one of the only actors that I know that will talk to a fan and, like, you'll have to walk away from him
Yeah.
basically, which that's pretty rare. I mean, there are a lot of really good guys out there, but Robert, I think, is in a sort of a class all his own. A great storyteller as well.
Oh, for sure. It's funny too, because I don't think that anybody has ever walked away from Robert England's table at an appearance and gone, "Well, that wasn't cool." Like, I mean, he's always on. He's
Yeah.
every single person. He essentially almost puts on a show for them, because I mean, he's just so outgoing. He'll look at what you have to get signed, and he'll tell you 10 different facts about it. And oh, when I was making this during this scene, and he's just so incredibly fan friendly. And two weeks ago, we were talking with him at Horror Hound. And I mean, he's just such a great guy. And like I said, like you were saying, I don't think anybody, you almost have to walk away from him. I don't think anybody walks away from Robert Englund going, oh, well, that wasn't great. I mean, even the first time that I met him, I mean, I was just jaw dropped at how awesome he was, and I walked away like, oh my god. And it was funny, so when I went to take my picture with him, he had his arm around me. My buddy was taking, Russell Ray was taking the picture, and he went into full Freddy mode. He goes, take the picture, bitch. Had his arm around me, and I was like, I will never again be as happy as I am right now. So dude, just incredible guy, man.
Yeah, yeah, he is. He's one of a kind. Well, Jeremy, I tell you, man, it's been a great conversation tonight, and I really want people to go back and check out Easter Sunday if you haven't already. But definitely keep an eye out for Fredheads, because I think that's going to be a documentary to see. So, Jeremy, man, I really appreciate you coming on tonight. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks, man. I had a blast, and I really appreciate it. And I respect you as an artist and as a filmmaker, and I love your flicks, man. So I was pumped when you hit me up about the show. I'm like, oh shit, this is gonna be awesome. So I definitely appreciate it, man.
Well, hey, I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, we'll have to do this again sometime, man. That'll be fun.
Definitely.
But you guys, I want to thank you guys for watching tonight, and I want you, as I said, to check out these great projects that Jeremy has worked on and is working on now. And until next week, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all very soon. Take care.